Alrighty. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Conscious Conversation brought to you by the Growing Busy Kids Technical Assistance Center North. Today, we have the pleasure of having Dr. Lorri Sullivan here to talk with us about tools for transition in times of stress. I'm Lorri. I'm project lead and technical assistance specialist at the Growing Busy Kids TA Center North. And I'd like to introduce you to my colleague, Sefi Support.
Hi, my name is Sefi Boysen. I'm a senior technical assistance specialist with Growing Busy Kids North. And we have the pleasure, like Lorri said, of having Lorri Sullivan on the call with us, another guest. We're happy to have you, and please introduce yourself.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the podcast. I'm Lorri Sullivan. I'm the Assistant Director for Training and Curriculum at the Center for Autism and Early Childhood Mental Health at Montclair State University. Lots of words. I'm representing the SEFI initiative, Socio-Emotional Formation Initiative. So many of you have heard of SEFI, part of the SEFI team. So the SEFI team created this document called Tools for Transition, Trauma-Informed Tools for Transition. We created it during the COVID time, but we really think that it's meaningful for any times of transition and stress. So the things that we'll talk about are not specific to the pandemic that's going on now, certainly applies to it, but we recognize and understand that there are other situations that are stressful and we need to make transitions. And so we developed this two-sided document that we'll go through with things that we can expect and then things that we can provide during times of transition, so during times of stress. Trauma-informed practices are something that we all need to be informed about in our work with infants, toddlers, children, families. And if you look at the definition of trauma, it's an event, a large event that overwhelms us, something that's distressing and overwhelms us emotionally, right? So trauma can be defined individually for people. So everyone's trauma is not the same. And when we think about the pandemic, we can recognize that all of us are going through the pandemic, right? We're all going through the same experience, but we all are going through it individually, right? So if you think about my experience during the pandemic is not the same as Stephanie's or Lori's. So we know that's true for all the children and families we work with, all of the staff we work with. So an interesting time because we're going through a common experience, but there are all individual variations of it. So the tools for transition, we made this infographic, which we think is easy to keep as a reference, because it's double-sided. There's not a lot of words, not a lot of reading. It's something that we hope that people will post, you can pull it out quickly, think about it in your work. But we'll start and we'll think about adults, right? Because we want to honor and recognize how important adults and caregivers are in the work with infants, toddlers, and young children and their families. So we'll go through the document. Lorri and Steffi and I we'll go through the document. We'll talk about adults, then we'll talk about infants, toddlers, and young children. So the first thing we know, and this is no surprise to anyone, right, is that we can expect a lot of uncertainty from the adults, from the caregivers, from the staff at centers, right? The feeling of, I don't know what's going on, I have so many questions, nothing's the same. We can expect those kinds of reactions. And those are reactions that are stress-based, right? And we all handle stress differently. We all show stress differently. So directors and supervisors who are supporting staff need to be aware that they can anticipate there will be stress reactions from the adults, right? And that we feel stress in our bodies, right? So we may not be showing it any other way except through our bodies. So a staff member who's at a staff meeting maybe and is sitting with their arms crossed and very tense. That may be one person's sign of reaction. Somebody else may just continually break down in tears. You know, there's a lot of information coming at everyone working in this field right now, all of the new procedures, all of the new protocols, all of the health and safety requirements, and it's overwhelming for everyone, right? But overwhelming doesn't mean that it can't be handled. Right, overwhelming is when I just can't take any more information in. So I think one thing we can be mindful of in caregivers is that they may need to handle things a little at a time, right? So we don't maybe hand a 100-page document to somebody and say, here are the new requirements, read them tonight, and tomorrow we'll start them. Right, we're gonna try and break them down, which I'm sure people have been doing. So we're gonna expect uncertainty. In adults, we're going to expect reactions maybe that we've never seen. You know, maybe the person who is always calm and cool and collected now is breaking down and crying over everything. So expect, good to know we can expect different reactions, and that reactions may be big, we say, big feelings in the adults. So that's a big one. Then we say during times of transition, when people are under stress, we can expect that they'll be seeking out safety, right? I need you. I need to know what's going on. So for directors and supervisors supporting staff, what they can think about is the importance of, just like we'll say with young children, the importance of everyday familiar routines. That to think about, are there routines and practices at their center, in their staff teams that they can continue, that help me feel like, okay, this is how we do it here. That may be important. So, you know, if before the pandemic people had a monthly birthday celebration, you know, let's keep that in place and figure out how we can do it. It may look a little different, but to think about what are those practices that make everyone feel comfortable. And that people may need, adults may need lots of reminders and lots of review about things in order to process the information and in order to feel safe, right? So even though yesterday, Stephanie, if you were the director and you told me, here's how we're gonna handle the pickup time for the parents, you told me yesterday, I may still have questions for, you know, several days because it's new and I'm trying to process it and I'm unsure and I'm nervous. So I think that the best thing to remind everyone about is that idea that, again, we don't know unless we ask what everybody else's experience has been. So it's really important to ask questions. How was it going for you? What did you experience through this pandemic? So we're going to expect people to seek safety, right? I want to be close to people. I want to reconnect with the people that I was close with. So that's important to support them. Then we said already, we can expect big feelings from everyone. Right, so not to be surprised that adults are going to have big feelings. Maybe, you know, there are a lot of individual private worries that may be coming back to work with people. So just because the center's open and we're back to work doesn't mean that everything at home has settled down. For people who are not back to work in person and are working at home, we know that there's a lot of stress just in that. So people who are managing homeschooling and managing to do their work remotely, and then managing their household and managing the care and safety of their family members. All of these things can invoke big feelings in all of us, right? So I think it's, you know, we always say no feelings are wrong, right? They're what you're feeling. So we don't want to stop people from having feelings, but we want to recognize them, pay attention to them, acknowledge them. That's always important. So those are the things we would talk about with adults. Now, for children, right, if we start over again with the same list, expect uncertainty, right? Children may need lots and lots of reminders. Children may need lots of reassurance of how things are happening. I think most people that I've been talking with have said that they feel that the kids are doing well and are adapting. We know that, you know, if children feel safe, if they see the adults around them projecting calmness and feelings of safety, then that will make it okay for children, right? So we really want to focus on that. So important to tell children developmentally what's appropriate about things. You know, if children have, the preschoolers may have questions or talk about what they know about the virus and ask some questions. You know, we want to do things developmentally appropriate, right? So we don't need to give them all the information we have, but we want to say reassuring things to them. You know, we might say, yes, some people are getting sick, but look here, everybody here is working real hard to be healthy and stay safe. We're wearing our masks. Do you see everybody with their masks on? Yes. Are you wearing a mask? Yes. Is Miss Lorri wearing a mask? Yes. We're wearing our masks. We're washing our hands. We're keeping safe. And that should be enough, right? So we have a phrase we use that adult worries and uncertainty should live in the adult world, right? We're the caregivers, we're the adults. We've got to handle this, and we have to make the children feel safe. So we can expect in children's uncertainty lots of stress behaviors, right? And we know what stress behaviors look like in young children. They can be really anything, right? From a whole range of behaviors. So we can expect pretty much that children under stress may show regressions, right? So when we think about most of our centers were closed for, say, 6 months. 6 months in the life of a 2-year-old is a big difference than 6 months in the life of a 30-year-old, right? So it's a really long time. They may have forgotten, you know, how things work. They may need lots of reminders. They may be anxious. You know, it's a whole re-entry, a whole separation that's happening again. So I kind of separated from you and now I'm back with you. So we may see lots of challenging behaviors. We may see clinginess. We may see crying in children. We may see children who are more withdrawn. We may see children who are more wild and energetic in their behaviors under stress. We definitely may see and expect issues in toileting, feeding, eating, sleeping behaviors, right? That we always think about the activities of daily living when we're under stress. You know, that's typically one of the places that we show it. Children may, you know, refusal. We might see that. So I think we can expect all behaviors and a range of behaviors, and individual children will express it differently. So then for young children, we're going to expect that they're going to be seeking safety, right? They're going to be seeking out reassurance. I'm okay, you're okay. Most young children who have relationships, attachment relationships with their caregivers, get that message. If you're okay, I'm okay. We're going to be okay, right? We talk about that idea of the invisible string, right? There's a wonderful children's book with that title, The Invisible String. But if you think about it, between a infant, toddler, young child and their caregiver, so their caregiver or their parent, there's an emotional invisible string that connects us, right? And children often will look to the adults to figure out how they should feel or respond to a situation. So if I'm a young child and something happens or there's stress, I'm unsure about something, and I look to my caregiver and my caregiver is sobbing, that invisible string is going to share that emotion with me, right? And I may then feel those same feelings, right? So we say I can stir up induce in somebody else what I'm feeling. And particularly, we know it happens in caregiving relationships, right? So children may need constant, lots of reassurances about, again, now they're separating again from mommy and daddy, from their family, and coming back into program. We may have, challenges with the arrival and ending times, the pickup. So we might see behaviors, coming out, stress behaviors during those times. They may need to be a little more clingy, right? Want to be closer to you, want to make sure they know that you're watching them, that you're paying attention to them, that you see them. And in terms of expressing, children will express those big feelings we talked about also with adults. So I think the best thing that caregivers can do, parents can do, is to see, hear, and acknowledge those feelings, right? When somebody's crying, it doesn't help if you say, "Oh, stop crying. What are you crying for?" What's better and what's more helpful is to sometimes say, would it help if I got you your blankie? Would it help if we sat in the quiet area and I read you a story, right? We used to be able to say, would it help if I give you a hug? That may not be one of our choices now, but you can think of something else. Would it help if I played with you in the block area? Do you need someone to be with you? Would it help if you were alone? Do you want to be left alone? So most of our centers do a great job. They have, little cozy, quiet areas that children can go to, but we should be expecting these big feelings, and that children need to be able to have trust that they can express these big feelings with adults who are prepared to handle them, right? So as adults and caregivers, there is no emotion that a young child should show us that we can't tolerate, right, and handle. And it's okay if they're feeling that, right? It's okay. And we have to get that message across. And once, we say this with tantrums, right? That when a young child is having a tantrum, the best thing that we can do as caregivers or adults is to let them have it out, have their tantrum out, make sure they're safe. Try not to talk to them, right? Because there's no language that's getting through to their brain when they're having a tantrum. They're on, their brain is on red, on fire. They're not hearing language. They're not interpreting language. But once there is a little quieting down period, once the child starts to calm down, then we can engage, right? Then we can say those things like, okay, do you want to go get your juice now? Do you want to wash your hands? So giving those choices. So big feelings, I think, are something that most of us in early care and education handle very well every day. This isn't new for anybody that works with infants and toddlers and young children, but I think it's a good reminder that we might be seeing more of them in children because of the multiple things that are transitioning.
Thank you so much, Lorri, for that very detailed description of this fantastic document. I know Lorri and I have a couple questions in regards to the document because it's so detailed and it's a wonderful way to lay out what you were just talking about. So in regards to adults, when it comes, I know you mentioned before there was a lot of people had said children are adapting, it seems like, a lot quicker than adults are. So how are we navigating adult anxieties when children of that family are, we think, totally fine and calm and everything's good, but the parents or the guardians or families are anxiety about what's going on?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think for those of us that are supporting families and adults that are feeling this stress, I think it's important to make them aware of how children are watching and feeling what they're feeling. And that it's not that a parent or a caregiver shouldn't express their emotion, but that they should be mindful of if they're feeling really overwhelmed, it's probably best to do that away from the child, right? So everyone is going to have a breakdown, and there are going to be times when, you know, mom or a staff member is just in tears over something. And so we want to take that, remove ourselves maybe from the child at that moment, because it can be really scary and unsettling for a young child to see their caregiver overwhelmed with emotion, right? You know, most children can tolerate, oh, mommy is crying a little. But if I'm really, you know, feeling out of control of my emotion, then I should separate myself. I should make sure that somebody else can take over. And I think just to remind parents and caregivers how much children pay attention to us. You know, we say they know every look on your face. So, you know, little ones know that if they're trying something that they know their mom doesn't really like or their dad doesn't really like, they've memorized your face enough so that they know, oh, you know what? No, she's not really upset yet, because when she really gets upset, her eyebrow moves, right? Mm-hmm. And they do it another time because they check out your face, and your face hasn't made that face yet. So I think a reminder to all caregivers and adults how much they watch us, how much they pick up from us, and how much they can share the emotions that we're feeling, and the idea that we pass emotions back and forth in caregiving relationships.
And that invisible string analogy is so eye-opening. If you think about, you know, what you project as an adult around children, you forget that, you know, they absorb and they feel what you feel. And just hearing that really made me about a lot of the caregivers that we have out there, and how if they're under stress and they're around children for long periods of time, you know, the children at that age are going to feel what they feel.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's, you know, we are absolutely not denying, any of us, that people are going to feel stressed. Everybody's stressed, right? Right now, it's a time of great stress. It's a time of great individual stress. It's a time of great community stress. It's a time of great, you know, national stress. There's a lot of stress coming at us. So we're not denying that it's happening, but managing how we handle it and how we show it in front of young children is important. And I think, you know, we use the phrase of looking at young children, infants, and adults, and what's going on with kind eyes, right? So not being so quick to judge somebody who's going through a hard time or showing some stress, but try and practice that kindness, you know, and to understand that we're all gonna, just like we would do with young children, they're gonna slip up, they're gonna make mistakes. If they pour their juice all over the table, we don't say, oh my God, you're a disaster, right? We say, that's okay. Everybody makes mistakes. Here, let me help you. Let's all clean it up, right? The same thing with adults. They're going to make mistakes.
I think what you were saying, Lori, a little earlier, was a real eye-opener for me, because I'm talking with some child care centers that, you know, some very well-intentioned parents who are wanting the best for their children, but are concerned about the children wearing a mask. And child care programs are finding that kids are fine with the masks. It's just something that they get used to. And when you described a teacher being able to very developmentally appropriate share with the child, you know, this is what we're doing to keep safe. We're wearing masks. We're washing our hands. So I'm thinking about how programs might be able to share that with parents, that although the parent may look at the mask differently, the child is looking at the mask as something that's helping protect them, keeping them safe, keeping their friends safe, their teachers safe, their family safe. So they're looking at it not as really an infringement on their freedom, but as a way to be part of the solution. Like, I'm a child, but I can do this to be safe, to keep safe.
Absolutely. And I think, you know, we understand and we know that young children thrive on routine and regularity, right? So we know if we go into any preschool room in our region, in the state, in our country, we'll see a schedule, right? And I know when I was in the classroom, in a preschool classroom, the children eventually knew the schedule better than I did, right? They internalized it, and they would tell me, oh, it's time after snap we go outside. And they just knew. They couldn't read the clock, but they knew the order. And so, if we reinforce, these are part of our everyday routines. We're putting on our masks, we're washing our hands. That's just what they'll do, right? Because it'll be under that umbrella of, this is what we do in the Bluebird room. We do, and they follow it.
That's a great reminder, and I love the way that you talked about the need for that with staff as well. That, whatever the common practices were within the program, to be able to continue them to the greatest degree possible. If there was always coffee available on Friday morning, if there was always a birthday celebration. I think one of the things that can be challenging is when a director is working with staff members who are processing and handling the stress of the pandemic in a very different way than they themselves do. So what kind of suggestions do you have for people who are trying to, work with people who are dealing with the situation very differently, and maybe in a way that they're not really sure how to support this person, whether it's their staff member, their coworker, a parent that they're working with?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think the first thing is to be a good observer, right? That's important. So what are you noticing about the person's reaction? And paying attention is important, so if there was a staff member who, never spoke up before and kind of was quiet and just went about their work, and now all of a sudden they're exploding and saying, what are we doing? What are you talking about? I have to do that now. I hope that a good director, a director who's tuned in, is going to notice that, right? So we have to first notice things. And I think next is take a step back, reflect, don't respond in the minute, because if that person is blowing up and I'm right in there and saying, yeah, that's what we're doing, you better do that now, that's going to put up their guard, right? So I think we have to first notice, then reflect, think about it, and think about what might be going on with that person. I wonder, we use that phrase, I wonder why she had that strong reaction. Is something going on with her personally? Did something happen before I saw that reaction? And I think for directors, I think they just have to recognize and expect that everyone will have a different reaction, right? Again, we started by saying this is the common experience that is being experienced individually different for each of us, right? If we always talk about individual differences in early care and education. So how can I meet individual differences for young children? How can I meet individual differences in adults would be something to think about. And I think for anyone who's facing this with people having all different reactions, they have to pay attention to themselves, and they have to be okay first. Dr. Caitlin Mulcahy at our center, she gave us four key phrases during this pandemic that we've been sharing with other people. So the first is thinking about taking big breaths, right? So everyone needs to think about their breathing, maybe take that moment before you're responding when you see a big reaction from somebody else. The other thing we need to do, no surprise, is patience, right? I have to have patience with you. I have to have patience with myself. I have to have patience with the children and the staff members. I have to give myself permission, give permission to people to have these big reactions. There's a lot going on, right? I have to give myself permission as the director. I'm not always going to know the right answer. I'm not always maybe going to do the right thing. And then the last practice is forgiveness, right? Forgive myself when I slip up, forgive myself when I don't have the right response, forgive the children, forgive my coworkers. So I think we have to practice, even more so now, we have to practice these kind of mindful techniques. And the breathing, there's a lot of information out there for some calming breathing techniques you can use for young children. I've seen people who do the, they sit quietly with the children when they want them to calm down, and they talk about pizza breath. And so they say, pretend you have a piece of pizza in your hand right now. Okay, take a smell of it, breathe in. So all the kids, they smell and that smells good. Okay, oh, but the pizza's really hot. I have to breathe out and make the pizza cooler. So they can, do practices like that. So calming techniques are more important right now. And we know self-care, like you said, Lorri, about if we did something as a group at our center before, let's make sure it's still happening. But practicing those mindfulness and kindness techniques, I think, are all we can do. And to recognize that everybody is not going to have the same reaction, right? I've been through a different experience. You've been through a different experience.
I love that where you are describing that the kindness aspect of it. That I think it's really, really impactful.
And I was going to say for directors and supervisors, Lorri, to think of that invisible string for them, to the staff and to the families and eventually to the children, that parallel process. So if the director is overwhelmed and stressed and is going from room to room and spreading that, that's going to affect everybody, right? So they have to be conscious, just like a parent or caregiver has to be, of how they're reflecting out their emotion and their experience to everyone else, right? So they're the parent, the big parent at the center.
Yeah, I think that analogy is great. And then you talked about the need to ask questions. And I'm thinking a stressed out teacher who's just learned the new procedures and now she's feeling incompetent because she can't remember the procedures. And that whole idea of giving grace and forgiveness and I know an administrator who says, we're in this together, and I know that it's hard to remember all these things, and we're all doing the best that we can, and that's all that we can do, and we're here to help each other to continue to provide that supportive environment where asking questions is okay. And it's okay to admit that you don't remember how to handle this, or you're not sure if you did the right thing. And just the idea of the forgiveness and grace of, we're all doing something no one ever expected in their lives to need to do. And it's a very challenging experience, but we're getting through it together.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that idea of partnering up. So, a director who sees someone struggling and either gets someone to help them or helps them themselves is going to make a big difference to someone, right? That I'm helping you. And, we have to make it okay in our field to need and ask for help. That's another thing that we have to stress. So I remember, when I was newly graduated as a teacher, that I thought I had to know how to do everything because I was the teacher, right? And I wouldn't have felt comfortable going to my supervisor, my principal, my director, and saying, I don't really know what I'm doing, right? Because I was supposed to know. Now, I think we want to promote more the idea that asking for help is okay because we are all in this together and we are a program that works together for a common goal. So if Lorri doesn't know how to do something and she asks Stephanie and Stephanie can help her with that, great, that makes us all better, right? So we shouldn't be concerned about admitting we need help with something. There's no way we need to know everything. We can't know everything, right? Everybody has individual strengths and talents. There might be somebody who loves to organize things and that's their thing. And so they're going to organize all the supplies coming in and everybody else doesn't have to worry about that. And maybe, your thing is you're very creative. So you're going to, decorate the entryway or something. But let's look at what are people's individual strengths and try and tie into that or ask them to use their strengths instead of focusing on what we can't do, right? Like,
Yeah, Lorri discussed last podcast about the two types of caregivers right now, or the staff members we have in our centers. One is, staff that are returning from the previous year, and then you have staff that are newly hired that have never worked in a child care center before. So now you have staff that understand, or at least will try to understand the regulations from last year, the differences, and then you have the new people who are coming on board and this is all they know. So we were trying to see, trying to give some advice about how to deal with those two types of staff members. And what would you say to a director that has those two kinds of staff members plus the big feelings, big worries, big anxieties on a daily basis?
I would say have lots of chocolate, first of all, whatever you need. No, I think just to recognize and acknowledge what you're saying, Stephanie, that we have that happening. And there are people who are gonna be thinking, oh, well, this is the way we've always done it. And we're gonna have other people saying, what am I supposed to do? How do I do that? And I think, above all, we have to keep calm. And we have to think, why are we here, right? So keep going back to why am I here? We're here to provide a safe, nurturing, enriching environment for children and to support relationships. So, maybe they have to partner those staff up, so a person who's there will mentor the newer person, but to recognize that the new people might bring new strengths and new gifts to the program, that we haven't had. So just because I'm new doesn't mean I can't embrace this and I can't be competent in this situation.
Yeah, and we also talked about checking in, making time with them just to say, hey, are you all right? Are you okay? Because I like what you said about the private worries. I think we understand that a lot of us have our own anxieties and our own situations that going on at home in our personal lives as well as professional lives. So Lorri and I had discussed maybe on a weekly basis, having directors even put it in their calendar, check in on Lorri today, check in on Stacy today, check in on so-and-so, making an effort to be mindful of everyone's just, hey, are you okay? Just a daily check-in with your staff members. And so they know that you care, number one, and also that you understand that checking in with them is important to you.
Absolutely, I love that. And the idea of paying attention is so important. And not to just checking in, yes, absolutely, they should be checking in. But the other part of checking in is noticing. So noticing the little things and remembering to say, hey, thanks so much for doing that yesterday. Or that was really great when I saw you talking to that little guy who was having a tough time, during snack. So, to be visible and to move around the center is so important. It shouldn't be an uh-oh moment when the director comes into the room, right? That the staff feels, uh-oh, what's going on? There must be something wrong. She's coming in, right? And in most of our high quality centers, that's not happening. The director should be, around, and the supervisor should be part of the everyday experience. So yeah, checking in, noticing, acknowledging, thanking. We have to go back to all those good things that we learned in kindergarten, right? As we say.
I think, Lorri, I love the way you described we're needing to continue the high quality practice, the safe and the nurturing and the enriching. So although we change things up a little bit or a lot in fact, we're still providing the highest quality services. And so although we may not be able to greet each child with a hug right now, we still recognize that when kids need hugs, we need to give them, even during a pandemic. We're not going to change our practices so that we're not providing care, comfort, and nurture to the children. And I was thinking about how that's similar to what you've been talking about with directors' relationships with the staff. Although now, according to the licensing, and the new safety guidelines, directors aren't able to into classrooms as freely as they did in the past. They will be, as you said, paying attention and observing. And if it's a staff member who is needing some extra support, then maybe that is like that one child who's needing a hug. You know, that director is noticing that that staff member needs her, needs that director to go in and revisit the procedure. To support the teacher, to provide the safe, nurturing environment for the teacher so that the teacher can feel comfortable in continuing to provide all this good to the kids.
Yeah.
I keep hearing, you know, licensing saying, do the best you can. So it's not as if it's an iron gate the director can't cross, but the director needs to be very intentional when she does need to cross it. It needs to be for a very good reason. And I think supporting staff is the very best of reasons.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can check in without physically being in the room. We know that, right? And acknowledge things. And I think the idea of being present, you can be present in lots of different ways, right? Is so important. And acknowledging, you know, I think also we have to acknowledge and in some ways celebrate, look what we're doing. No one has, like someone said before, no one's ever done this before. No one has ever, you know, been through a pandemic and opened and childcare centers before and provided high quality, you know, nurturing care. So while we're challenged, we're also challenged in the way that we're doing some really good work, and we have to acknowledge that.
Right. Yeah, that is absolutely true. And Lorri, your organization has provided so much value to the early childhood community in so many ways. I'd love to talk about some of the different things that you've done. And I know I've been on some conferences with national folks, and when they hear about what SEFI is doing, what Montclair is doing, and what you've done, and how I think you were really ahead of the curve with the pandemic because of all the work you did as a result of Superstorm Sandy. So can you tell us a little bit about what kind of things you've been, you know, doing to assist early childhood programs during the pandemic, and maybe tell us what your future plans are, because I know you've got some exciting initiatives coming down the pipe.
Yeah, so thank you so much, Lorri and Stephanie. And you know, we're honored to be part of the Grow New Jersey Care system and to partner with you and the work that you're all doing out there. So yes, the SEFI initiative grew out of work that was funded by the state after Superstorm Sandy. And originally we developed and started to offer in the state the Keeping Babies and Children in Mind infant and early childhood mental health workshops throughout the state. So those are a series of 7 workshops that target topics on infant and early childhood development that have been happening now for 6 years, 5-6 years now. So we've had thousands of professionals throughout the state take the Keeping Babies and Children in Mind series. I'm very proud of that. And now through the pandemic, we shifted it to be online. So Keeping Babies and Children in Mind was offered all through the spring and the summer, just in an online format. And I'm excited to be announcing that we've worked on revisions and we've updated the series. And so starting in October, we will be offering a newly revised and updated curriculum. So we're excited about that. Also the same format, 7 individual workshops that can be taken as the whole series or individually. So they'll be rolling out online. I think we've already sent out some announcements about dates. So that's something we're really excited about. It has a new look, has some new videos. The content has mostly remained the same, but we've updated anything that needed to be refreshed or updated. So I'm excited about that. And then through the pandemic, we were still able to offer Sefi support to centers as needed. So technical assistance around social-emotional needs of children or staff members. So we've still been able to connect virtually with centers. So, you know, we work with the people from your group who make referrals to us. And so we've worked with centers that way. And then we also offered through the spring and the summer, we'll be continuing now in the fall, something called the 3 C's that the title is Conversations for Connection and Calm. And those were online groups where we offered a facilitator to do some reflective practice work with providers around the stress that everyone's been going through. And those were online, an hour session where we met with the same group of people, so a small group of people, and people from all over the state, you know, could be in a group because we were online. And we talked about people's experience and shared some of the things that we've talked about. Well, what can you do to take care of yourself? What can you do to be calm? So it was a safe place for people to share and express some of what they were going through. And those met for 6 weeks, so six sessions. And then we offered them, we started in the spring right after everyone was at home, and kept them going through the spring, and then we offered them in the summer, and they'll be starting up again soon. So we're excited about those.
Awesome. And just to bounce back to the relationship with children, I know you were talking about Hurricane Sandy and during this time too. Do you see kind of similarities between appropriate behaviors of what's manifested outside of those huge things we had in our area? I know when it comes to infants and toddlers and preschoolers, there's different behaviors that occur because of stressful situations. Can you kind of dive into some of the big, I won't say the most popular, but the most common behaviors that we see in children in classrooms because of these huge life changes and crises?
Yeah. Sure. So I think, probably top of the list would be those changes in the daily living skills. So the feeding, the sleeping, the toileting, and maybe regressions in those areas. And that would be for all ages across the board. And then I think just those things that we said, changes in the way they respond. So children who typically would, be happy and cheerful, maybe now are more clingy and whiny and crying. Children who maybe were quieter, maybe now are more revved up and are louder and more energetic. So I think first of all, you need to know the children, which we know in caregiving relationships, so you'll know out of the range of their typical responses, the things that kind of make you take a step back and think, that didn't seem like little Bobby's, typical reaction. So knowing the child and then looking at the range of emotions that you might see displayed or behaviors. But really, I guess we could say what kind of behaviors would we see under stress? Anything, really anything. So, and not, there could be some positive things happening too, it's the things it's more are the things that we define as challenging, right? That bother us as adults.
And I also think it's important to remember that these behaviors aren't always because of something that they're diagnosed with, or they could be diagnosed with. It truly could just be from a traumatic experience or stress, or something as simple as things going on at home, or maybe they're moving to a new house. Differentiating a developmental issue and then a traumatic, stressful manifestation.
Absolutely. It could be I didn't sleep well last night, or I'm hungry. I can't find my favorite fire truck that I want to play with. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And what do you think is trauma? I think a lot of people think of very explosive, negative, really terrible things happening, but trauma is on a spectrum, correct? I feel like it's as simple as losing their lovey, or losing a blanket they have, all witnessing domestic violence or things like that. So there is a spectrum of trauma that is out there, correct?
Absolutely. And again, we think of something that's deeply distressing and overwhelms my emotions and my symptoms. right? So depending on your developmental age, that could be different, something that may overwhelm all of my systems and my emotions as a 6-month-old is going to be different than probably as a 25-year-old, right? Hopefully. It's individually based. Depends on, what else is going on in your life. Is this a one-time event? Is this something that is added on top of other stressors? We know that there can be a buildup of stressful traumatic events, and then that compounds, the way I experience it and stress.
I liked what you had said earlier, Lorri, where you said overwhelming doesn't mean that we can't handle it.
Mm-hmm.
In the case of a child, that child may need the support of a caring adult to be able to handle it, or an adult may need the support of another caring adult to be able to handle it. It's overwhelming, and the idea that you can gain the skills that you need in a supportive environment to be able, to get beyond this situation.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's also important to label it, right? So to say, name what children are feeling, because lots of times very young children might not connect what they're feeling in their body to the words that we're using, so we want to label it. And then we say, if I name it, I can tame it, right? If I know what I'm dealing with, then I can figure out how to handle it, right? So that's important.
So could you give an example of how a teacher could help a child with that naming?
Yeah, sure. So I guess, for instance, if a child is just really, crying off to the side, and I'm not really sure what happened, I didn't see anything happen maybe before I noticed he was crying, I think we can, the teacher might, go over and get down on their level and say to him, oh, I see you're crying. Are you sad? Are you mad? Can you tell me what happened? And see if they can answer those questions, and hopefully they may be able to respond to them. And I think going with the idea of saying, would it help if? That's, that give them a few choices. Would it help if you just stay right here by yourself? Would it help if I go get a teddy bear and ask him to come over and help us? Help if your friend came over. And I think that if we can offer a few choices that we think they might say yes to is important, Might not be the time to say, do you want to go in the bathroom and wash your hands? Because that might be a no right now.
Yeah. I think just the idea that the teacher is recognizing and acknowledging and to help the child figure out what they're feeling and what's going on. I love the idea of, asking them questions and giving them those words.
Yeah, exactly. And I think you give a few choices, and if they say no, then you say, okay, you know what, I'm going to leave you here. I'm going to leave you, but I'm going to be right over there, and I'm going to come back and check in with you. And then you do that, right? So if you leave them alone, they're not able to respond. You're watching them, we always are watching and checking on them. Then you come back and check in.
Yeah. And in the case of information overload too, we have a lot of families who feel very comfortable sharing what's going on and be overly truthful maybe sometimes. I know certain new staff members may find it hard to navigate how to discuss what's going on with children that know too much. And I think it's hard to, you can't control what's happening at home. You can only control what's happening inside your classroom. So instead of a director talking to an adult and then an adult talking to a child, you want to be mindful of what you're saying and how you're saying it. Because you can't necessarily always control what parents or grandparents or family is saying to children. So you have to even would you recommend just being consistent across the board for all children of obviously appropriate age group?
Yeah, absolutely. I think so. I think, we to be mindful as adults that we don't have to go into detail about things. And if a child is telling you what they understand, that, grandma told me she saw on the news that this bad thing is happening, we don't always have to get into that discussion with the child. We might say, oh, so, you spent time with your grandma, and I'm not giving into that information. Try and maybe steer the conversation away or stick to the facts. Yes, yes, grandma told you some people are getting sick, but again, we're all safe here and we're all healthy. And can you tell me some of the things that we're doing to be healthy? Those kind of things. And as much as we can point out who's helping and who's doing what the healthful things are, that's what we want to do.
That's a great idea, to redirect the conversation to something so simple. Oh, you saw your grandma this weekend, or where does she live? Or do you have other cousins that go with you? Or, I really think that's a great idea.
Yeah, because I think sometimes, and rightfully as adults, we get anxious about, oh my God, inside your head, you think, oh my God, where am I going to go with this? What am I going to say to him? And he may not necessarily be asking any questions. He may just be repeating back what they heard or looking for a response from you. So if you keep calm, and you don't say, oh my God, what did she said? What did she tell you? They're going to respond to that. But yeah, if you keep it even, keep it steady, and steer it a little around that.
Yeah, that's a great idea. And I know we talked before too about stress behaviors for children, and when it comes to adults and children, I find that giving adults, and similarly to children, multiple step processes to do something, sometimes during a stressful situation, it's almost like they forget a certain step, especially in adults. I know for myself, that's kind of how I am. I like doing things one at a time. So in this case, having new staff members or staff members that are returning that have these kind of big responsibilities now in multiple step processes it's tough. And dealing with children that have the same kind of stress issues, but not seeing the similarities between the two situations can be difficult.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And again, we all do different things when we're under stress, right? And to acknowledge that. I mean, I was doing something simple this weekend where I was trying to put follow some directions and put batteries into something, and it wasn't working. And I kept redoing it and doing it. It wouldn't work. I couldn't get these batteries. I changed the batteries, right? And I found myself, and I was doing this by myself. There wasn't anybody else with me, but I had to read the directions out loud to myself. Right, under stress, I had to read it out loud, like open the back of the item, place 2 AA batteries in, and now I'm laughing about it. Like, why did I have to read it out loud? I was the only one here. But under stress, I needed to hear the directions, I guess, to help me process them,
That's so true.
It kind of reminded me of before we had GPS in our cars, and we used to maybe print out directions, right, from MapQuest or something. And if you're following the directions, I remember somebody said once that if they're driving in their car following directions and the radio's on and they can't figure out where to go, they have to turn off the radio, right, to focus on the directions. So it's like too much overload.
That's so true. I actually do that even with GPS now. I still have to turn the music down to remind myself to make certain turns. That's very true.
Yeah.
That's great. Well, Lorri and I truly appreciate you coming on board, and we're so knowledgeable, and the work that you guys do over at Sefi and Montclair is just, well, it's not immeasurable. It's nice to know that we are measuring it nowadays. But we really appreciate your knowledge and your detailed description of that document, and just you being present with us. It's been really great.
Thank you. Well, my pleasure. And there's nothing that I would like to do better than talk to people like you who are doing the same work, right? We value our relationship with the group that you work with. And, we've been together from the beginning with Sefi. We've worked with all of the technical assistance specialists out of your office from when your project started up. And so we really value our relationships with all of you too. So thank you.
Thank you. I think that the programs that get a chance to listen to this are going to be able to take away some really valuable information that they are going to be able to use immediately to support children and adults in the program. So thank you. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Great. Thanks for having me.
And we'll make sure to send out the document for transition. It's in English and in Spanish. So we'll make sure to send that out with the podcast recording. And we truly hope that you'll join us next time for another topic for our conscious conversations. So again, Lorri Sullivan, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.